By late 1943, the Pacific War was entering a dramatic transformation. For nearly 2 years, Japanese forces had surged across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, but that momentum had finally reached its limit. The tide had turned. American forces advancing from Australia had secured key victories in the Solomons and along New Guinea, while the United States Navy, now massively expanded after Midway and Coral Sea, shifted from defensive operations to sustained offensive strategy. Japan's era of expansion was over, and the struggle for control of the Pacific was about to enter a new, unforgiving phase. Faced with an increasingly confident enemy, the Japanese High Command established a national defense perimeter across the Pacific. They transformed chains of islands into fortified outposts, unsinkable aircraft carriers designed to slow any American advance. The Gilbert Islands, the Marshalls, the Carolines, all were linked by airfields, coastal guns, and tightly coordinated defenses. These positions were not simply military outposts, they were intended as traps. If Americans attacked, Japanese garrisons would attempt to wear them down long enough for air and naval reinforcements to strike from massive nearby bases like Truk and Rabaul. Inside the U.S. High Command, strategy debates intensified. General Douglas MacArthur pushed hard for a return to the Philippines by way of New Guinea, while naval commanders like Chester Nimitz and Ernest King argued for a direct advance across the Central Pacific. They believed a Central Pacific campaign could cut a straighter path to Japan, seize critical airfields, and strike at the heart of Japanese defenses. At the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, the Allies sided with Nimitz. The Central Pacific Offensive was approved, placing Admiral Reynon Spruance in command. Even with approval, island hopping carried enormous risks. Amphibious assaults were among the most complex military operations ever attempted, and while the U.S. Marine Corps had developed amphibious doctrine in the interwar years, most early war landings had encountered only light defenses. What was coming next would be far more brutal, and nothing highlighted the challenge more than the personalities involved. Admiral Kelly Turner and Marine General Holland Howland Smith, both known for fierce tempers, clashed repeatedly over how to conduct the coming operations. Their disputes nearly derailed planning until Captain Carl Moore brokered a compromise. Turner would command all forces until troops reached shore. Then Smith would take over once the Marines were ashore and fighting inland. It wasn't a perfect system, but it created enough stability to proceed. Intelligence suggested that striking the Marshall Islands directly would put American forces dangerously close to Japan's powerful base at Truk. Instead, Spruance selected the Gilbert Islands as the first major target. The Japanese had occupied them since 1941. Operation Galvanic would strike at 3 key islands: Macon, Abemama, and most importantly, Tarawa. Tarawa's main island, Bitio, was the most heavily fortified. It was tiny, just a few kilometers long, barely a few meters above sea level, but guarded by nearly 5,000 Japanese troops, including elite naval landing forces. Rear Admiral Shibazaki, the Japanese commander, had transformed Bitio into a fortress. Reinforced bunkers, interconnected trenches, coastal artillery, and long fields of fire created one of the most densely defended positions in the Pacific. The narrowness of the island meant defenders could quickly reposition, and almost every weapon on Bitio could reach any point on the island. Shibazaki was so confident that he boasted, 1,000,000 men could not take Tarawa in 100 years. But the United States intended to prove him wrong. American planning relied heavily on amphibious tractors known as LVTs, tracked vehicles capable of crossing the coral reefs that surrounded many Pacific islands. Colonel David Shoup, leading the assault planning, selected beaches along the lagoon side for the initial landings. 3 waves of Marines would ride in LVTs directly onto the island. Subsequent waves would arrive by traditional landing craft, assuming, as planners believed, that the tide would be deep enough for them to cross the reef. But tides in the Gilberts were unpredictable. Former British residents warned that the planned date might coincide with an unusually low tide. Some officers supported the warning, others dismissed it. In the end, the date remained unchanged, a decision that would have deadly consequences. At 5 a.m. on November 20th, 1943, the Battle for Tarawa began. 3 battleships and multiple cruisers opened fire, sending shockwaves across the lagoon. To observers offshore, Bitio seemed engulfed in flame and smoke. Marines waiting in transports assumed nothing could survive the bombardment, but appearances were deceiving. Communication problems on the flagship disrupted coordination with aircraft. The bombardment also lifted earlier than planned, giving Japanese defenders precious minutes to reman their positions. At 9 a.m., after hours of waiting in the heat, the first wave of LVTs moved toward the shore. As they crossed the reef, they surprised the defenders. No previous American attack in the Central Pacific had used amphibious tractors on this scale. Once inside the lagoon, Japanese machine guns and artillery opened fire, but the Marines pushed forward. They reached the seawall and took cover, pinned by pre-sighted mortar fire. Radios malfunctioned in the saltwater. Officers were struck early, and the landing began to drift off script. But the first waves succeeded in establishing small footholds along the beaches. Tanks that managed to reach the shore provided crucial fire support. By evening, the Marines held a narrow, precarious beachhead. A strong Japanese counterattack could have thrown them back into the sea, but fate intervened. Earlier in the day, a shell from an American ship had fatally struck Admiral Shibazaki. Without his leadership, Japanese troops failed to organize a major night attack. The Marines survived the first night on BTO, exhausted
but determined.
At dawn on November 21, the second day of the battle, the Marines understood one thing clearly. If they didn't break the Japanese lines today, the cost in lives would grow even worse. The night had been tense, filled with scattered gunfire and sniper shots, but no large-scale counterattack had come. Shibazaki's death had created a fatal delay in Japanese coordination, and now the Marines were determined to exploit that opening. As reinforcements came ashore, many still forced to wade painfully across the reef under fire, the American foothold began to expand. Colonel David Shoup, already wounded but refusing evacuation, set up his command post in the ruins near the pier. His calm leadership under brutal conditions became a pivotal factor in holding the fragile beachhead together. Marines pushed inland through narrow lanes of shattered trees and burning debris, fighting bunker by bunker, trench by trench, as thick smoke and the stench of explosives choked the air. Japanese forces, though battered, were far from broken. Their fortifications were layered, interconnected, and designed for last-stand warfare. Many defenders were concealed inside reinforced pillboxes with overlapping fields of fire, forcing Marines to crawl forward under near-constant machine gun bursts. Flamethrower teams and demolition squads became essential. Working in small units, Marines tossed grenades into firing slits, followed by explosive charges to neutralize the hardened positions. It was brutal, close-quarters combat, chaotic, deafening, and deadly. Yet the battle slowly shifted in the Americans' favor. Reinforcing units from the 6th Marines arrived, including Sherman tanks. These tanks, larger, better armored, and more powerful than the light Stewards used earlier in the Pacific, proved invaluable. Supported by infantry, they blasted through major pillboxes and fortified structures that had resisted naval bombardment. With armored support, Marines widened their control of the island's northern shore. To the west, Major Michael Ryan's exhausted group accomplished one of the most important tasks of the day, capturing the far western tip of Bateo, known as Temanakan Point. This victory secured a safer landing zone for follow-on forces and prevented Japanese troops from launching flanking attacks. By afternoon, the Marines had successfully split the island in two. Isolated Japanese pockets continued to fight relentlessly, but the defensive pattern was broken. Colonel Shoup radioed his now famous message to General Julian Smith. Casualties many, percentage dead unknown. Combat efficiency, we are winning. That message captured the spirit of the battle. The cost was staggering, the conditions horrifying, but the Marines were steadily forcing the defenders into shrinking strong points. The most notorious of these would soon be called the Pocket, a dense cluster of bunkers, trenches, and interlocking rifle pits on the southwestern side of Bateo. Every attempt to assault it was met with ferocious fire, and progress came at a heavy price. The terrifying truth of Tarawa became clear. Even a tiny island could become one of the most dangerous battlefields on Earth if defended by determined troops with sufficient fortification. Despite the horrors, by nightfall on D+1, the result was no longer in doubt. The Marines now occupied the central and northern parts of the island. The Japanese, having lost coordinated leadership, were preparing for one final desperate stand. D+2, crushing the defenders. The third day saw the Marines pressing their advantage. Tanks rolled forward, infantry advanced behind them, and flamethrower operators scoured every fortified position. The pocket still resisted fiercely, but the Japanese line was shrinking. Reinforcements charged out of the bunkers in sudden banzai attacks, only to be met with concentrated American fire. Elsewhere across Battle, Marines advanced yard by yard, clearing each bunker and trench. Many Japanese fought to the last man. Others hid in underground shelters, emerging only to fire again. The Marines, having learned from earlier casualties, coordinated tank infantry teams, demolition squads, and supporting fire with increasing precision. The teamwork that had been chaotic on day one now became disciplined and effective. As the battle reached its climax, American bulldozers were brought forward, a strange but essential weapon on Battle. They pushed sand and debris over Japanese bunkers, sealing defenders inside, while grenades and flamethrowers completed the job. The pocket finally collapsed under overwhelming pressure. On the eastern side of the island, other Marine units advanced rapidly, clearing the last major Japanese resistance. At dawn on D+3, a desperate Japanese banzai assault erupted, the largest of the battle. Approximately 320 Japanese soldiers charged forward in a final attempt to break the American lines. They were cut down by Marine machine guns and rifles within minutes. It was the last organized resistance on Battle. By noon, the island was declared secure. Casualties and shockwaves. The cost of victory shocked the American public. More than 1,100 Americans were killed, with another 2,200 wounded, almost as many casualties in 76 hours as in the entire 6-month Guadalcanal campaign. The Japanese garrison suffered even more catastrophic losses. Over 4,600 of the 4,850 defenders were killed, many fighting to the death. Only 146 prisoners were taken, most of them Korean laborers rather than Japanese soldiers. On Macon, where the U.S. Army also landed, fighting was lighter but still deadly. In a tragic postscript, a Japanese submarine later torpedoed the carrier Liscombe Bay, killing 687 sailors, one of the deadliest naval losses of the war. News of Tarawa reached American households through the first war photographs showing U.S. Marines dead on the beach. Images that shocked the nation, but also awakened it. Many had believed the Pacific War was distant and abstract. Now the reality was undeniable. Japan's island defenses were formidable, and the cost of the coming campaign would be severe. Yet Tarawa also transformed American strategy. Commanders identified numerous failures: insufficient naval bombardment, poor communication, lack of tide prediction, weak waterproofing of radios, absence of underwater reconnaissance, overloaded assault troops, and flawed coordination between naval and air forces. But just as important were the lessons learned. Within months, the U.S. adapted. Production of new armored LVT models, creation of underwater demolition teams, multi-day pre-landing bombardments, improved tank support, better radios and communication ships, closer air-naval coordination. These changes reshaped the Pacific Campaign. When U.S. forces invaded the Marshall Islands in early 1944, they saw far fewer casualties. The lessons of Tarawa were paid for in blood, but they saved thousands of lives in later operations. Tarawa stands today as the moment when the United States fully understood the coming struggle. It wasn't just a tiny island in the Central Pacific. It was the beginning of a brutal series of battles that would define the last phase of the Pacific War. The Marines who fought across the coral sand of Battle carried those lessons forward to Kwajalein, Saipan, Pilaliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. Tarawa showed the world that even the strongest fortifications could be overcome by determination, adaptation, and overwhelming force. It also revealed something deeper, that victory in the Pacific would require an unshakable resolve and sacrifices on a scale the American public had not yet imagined. The story of Tarawa remains a testament to courage under fire and the reminder of the staggering cost of war, in the Pacific.